experience today. So Dina.
Thank you, sir.
Have at it, kiddo.
Appreciate it. Good morning. Good morning. It's so nice to have you. I have seen some of you recently, and I haven't seen some of you at all recently. So it's nice to meet you. My name is Dina Breslin, and I guess one of the things that I wanted to share in the beginning is how I got here and why I'm doing this particularly. So as Gary mentioned, I'm a coach and I've been hosting masterminds for a little while now, but I also do life and business work. I do other types of speaking engagements, and my other life is I sell for Swarovski crystal. So I have a very large direct sales team that is very busy at the moment because it's holiday shopping time. However, I feel really passionate. Where I came from was I practiced medicine as a gastroenterologic PA. That was about 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, somewhere in that area. And since that time, I have been super passionate about making sure that whoever I'm coaching, let's say, and even the people on my team, I wanted to know their health and wellness, their holistic life balance. And so I got kind of passionate recently, and I thought to myself, you know, I'd love to change the way we talk about health and wellness. I'd love to change the idea of how we approach healthcare and medicine. And so you going to see your doctor, instead of you being treated for a particular ailment or a particular symptom, I'd love to see us be treated for the system, the underlying issue, more so than anything else. Does that make sense, you guys? Who here sees a doctor on a regular basis for physicals, regular physicals, or even a functional medicine person? Anybody? Anybody? Awesome. Okay. All right. I was just asking, who sees a doctor on a regular basis, sir? And I think a doctor, and under healthcare. Yes, yes. Good. So that's wonderful. So the whole point of today is more so that you take away one or two things that you can implement today. There's going to be a lot of things in here that I am absolutely not going to go into detail on because I think we could have 3 weeks of training on that, like diabetes. You know, that in and of itself is a whole, seminar. But there are things that I'm going to be touching on that if you have questions on, we're going to open it up in short order in a little bit. If you think of a question and it's burning and you don't have something to write down, if you can't write your question down, certainly just ask me. This is informal. I just want it to be casual. I want you to have some takeaways. All right? So obviously, taking charge of our health, what we do and don't know about helping our body do its job. Our bodies are freaking amazing. They can heal on their own. That's what they're designed to do. Very passionate about that. But when you go often to see a physician or a physician group, you are being treated from the outside in rather than the inside out. And we're not helping our patients really understand how the body works, which is called physiology. And if we could understand a little bit more about how the body works, we would understand how the fuel we put into our body manages the mechanisms of physiology that then manifest in ways like disease, inflammation, diabetes, sugar load, those kinds of things. So we're going to talk in a minute. Okay, we cannot solve problems by using the same thinking we used to create them. Clearly, Albert Einstein. Now, I mean, it's a wonderful thought. I really want you to take some things away and look at your body and your health in a different way. That is really the goal for today. All right. Health and wellness essentially is a balancing act between some of the things that are bad for us and clearly some of the things that are good for us. All right. And poor diet being one of the #1 things in this country right now. All right. We are eating more calories than ever and we are nutrient poor. So we're actually taking in more calories and we have less nutrients in our body. Right, Eric? Okay. Chronic stress, another one. Very interestingly, some of us are moving around in our lives not even aware of the type of stressors that we're experiencing because we're so used to stress. Who's here used to stress in your life? Okay, look at that. And what I'm going to show us is that stress over a long period of time causes inflammation in the body that the body cannot handle. Autoimmune diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, things that we hear of out here are caused by stuff that's underneath here. Okay, microbes and toxins, allergens. Clearly there's a push for organic foods, whole foods, farm-to-table foods. We have microbes and toxins all around us that change the way the gut works. And the gut is a magnificent machine that if we took better care of it, it would serve us in a different way than how we're feeding it today. And allergens. We'd be so surprised at, we hear about gluten sensitivity. We hear about lactose intolerance. Those are the, kind of the main ones. But there's so many other food allergens that we may or may not have problems with that we don't know about. All right, good, fresh whole foods. If we consumed less packaged, anything, so I'm gonna, if you take away anything today, raid your pantry, please. Go home, do this with your spouse or your significant other or your family members. Raid the pantry. Anything that's in there that's packaged food for convenience, try to get rid of it. Really consider getting rid of it. We want as much fresh whole foods as possible. Clearly movement. 10 minutes of movement a day has shown to significantly decrease dementia and Alzheimer's and heart disease. Okay, so no, we don't have to do the 90 minutes, 90 px. What the heck is that one? Where you're killing yourself for 90 minutes. No, that's not the way it has to be. Sleep, studies show that if we get less than 6 hours of sleep, we have problems with stress hormones. We have an increase in appetite. All the things that we're trying to prevent outside of our sleep habits, our sleep pattern. So sleep is extremely important. And when you go to sleep, so who here loves to be a night owl? After 11, 12, 1 o'clock, you're doing work. Okay, so studies show that if you muck up your circadian rhythm, even though you think you're really productive at that time, you are actually increasing your cortisol. Cortisol adds to belly fat, adds to inflammation in your body, and stressors to your pancreas and your liver. So things that we actually don't necessarily think of, you could be harming yourself, okay? So keep that in mind. Water, hydration. Think of your muscles as sponges. Your heart's a muscle, okay? All your skeletal muscles, all your organs are sponges. Your brain is a sponge. And if the sponge is dry, that's not good, is it? It doesn't work or function the way it should. All the deep organelles in your cells, like mitochondria, absolutely need to be well hydrated. So who here lives on coffee? I feel like I do sometimes. I challenge you to balance it. For every cup of coffee, have a 12-ounce glass of water. Okay, so please. O2. So we could argue how much O2 there is in the atmosphere these days. However, I would just say that for those of you who are, intently working, you're hustling, you're focused, you might have a lot of things going on, you're in school, for example. A lot of times you're sitting still and you're at work, you are intently taking care of customers and the guys, right? Oftentimes we shallow breathe. You do a lot of shallow breathing, which what does that do to the body? It absolutely holds on to acid, which is carbon dioxide. Okay? Well, how does that manifest? How does that make you feel? Makes you feel like you have headache, makes you feel more hungry, makes you feel fatigued, tired. Like who wants to take a 2 o'clock in the afternoon nap? Anybody? Yeah, that would be me. Carbon dioxide overload because we're not taking deep breaths. Because we're not taking deep enough breaths. So let me just show you, since I have this one up, let me just show you a more powerful way to take a deep breath. And I'm going to challenge us to do this 5 times a day for 1 full minute. Now, for those of you who've been in my lectures before or even in the mastermind, we do talk about the deep breath because I am very passionate about it. So deep breathing best happens when you're sitting upright. You don't need to be meditating in any way. You can be standing, you can be sitting in your car, but having your back straight is the best way to do it. All right? Why? Because what's the breathing mechanism? What is it? Your lungs. If you're hunched like this, do you think your lungs can work efficiently? No, Not as efficiently. So sitting up straight, I know this sounds rhetorical, but I just want to go over that. The second part of breathing is instead of breathing from in through the mouth, you want to breathe in through the nose. In through the nose, you get a nitric oxide kick. That goes, when the air goes through your turbinates, your nasal turbinates, you get a nitric oxide kick. Nitric oxide actually increases serotonin and dopamine, and it actually vasodilates. So you have a little bit, your blood pressure can come down. You can feel your mood can change. You have a little bit of euphoria when this happens, and your blood pressure. Also, there's a bit of lubrication when you do this on a regular basis, a bit more lubrication in the joints. Okay, so I'm going to just show you. So for 1 minute, you could do 4 really good deep breaths in 1 minute. So say about 12 to 15 seconds for each deep breath cycle. Okay, so you can get 4 in. And if you did that for 1 minute, it helps to calm you. It spikes in serotonin. You get a little bit more mental clarity. And so here's how it goes. Ready? So through the nose. Imagining the lungs filling up. Hold it open. Your diaphragm goes down. Hold it for 4. And exhale longer like you're blowing out candles. Keep exhaling. There you go. So that was about 12 seconds or so. So you're increasing for 4. Now, Eric, you're sitting there with your shoulders up. I'm not sure if you were able to exhale everything. Try to exhale so that you can actually feel the whole, the lungs collapse. Okay, awesome. Let's try it one more time. In through the nose. Diaphragm is down. Imagine the lungs filling up. Imagine the oxygen exchange. Hold it. Exhale. Exhale longer than the inhale. Wonderful. And so that is so simple, but so powerful. Guess what else the extra oxygen does in your cells? If you did that 5 times a day for 1 minute, 5 throughout the day, you have more oxygen inside your cells that work with your mitochondria. So you are actually aerobic, more aerobic than you are anaerobic. Most people are walking around anaerobic, which again, carbon dioxide is also anaerobic. You're much more acid. Acid promotes inflammation in the body, promotes inflammation in the skeletal muscle. All right, so now you're more aerobic. So that means you have a little machines going on, little aerobic machines going on in your belly, so the belly fat can start to melt away a little easier. Just so we know, women hold on to belly fat a little bit differently than men. So oxygen really plays a huge role there, all right? So keep that in mind. So where were we? We were moving forward here. Sleep O2 light. By the way, 40% of Americans are vitamin D deficient. Why? Because we're not getting enough sunlight, and if we're out there, we're slathering on 70. All right, so 20 minutes of sunlight on exposed skin is good for you. All right, it's actually okay. You're not going out at noon, for goodness sake. You're not looking for the sunburn, but we do need light, and we do need the way the skin creates vitamin D. But who cares if you're vitamin D deficient? Well, actually, you're increasing the leaching of calcium from your bones. So for women, that can be a challenge. We have osteoporosis, osteomalacia. Also, it's shown to increase in cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline as we age when we're vitamin D deficient. I have a quick question. When you go to your doctor for your regular visit, does he do a vitamin D check?
That's really interesting you said that. I just had my annual physical, and I have to go get blood work, and the number one thing he says is you want to check your vitamin D.
Excellent, excellent. So there are a couple of other things that we're going to talk about, and I'm not sure, is this a functional medicine doctor or internist?
His
Family?
degree is in internal medicine, but he works in Ken Horst at the Tower Health.
Okay, all right. So functional medicine is a new not new, it's been around for quite a while, but functional and integrative health is kind of a new approach to the patient rather than the allopathic. Now, I was trained as an allopathic physician assistant, and allopaths and osteopaths tend, not as much osteopaths, but tend to place medication, use medication and procedures on patients rather than, as I was saying, to get to the underlying cause, which would be the functionality, the function, which is what functional medicine doctors do. Love and connection. Please do not underestimate the value of touching your significant other, hugging each other. We have a wonderful conversation in our mastermind going right now about hugging our spouses or hugging our significant others and the effect that it has on our emotional state, our mindset, our memory, our physical well-being. If you took one thing away, it would be to touch each other more, hug each other more, be intimate more. Okay? Thank you. And you're going on vacation tomorrow. All right. And in a world in a world today, and by the way, you're taking what you're hearing here and you're transferring it to your children. You're transferring it to the children in your life if you don't have your own children, because it does take a village. So you may have nieces or nephews, grandchildren, kids in the neighborhood. You are able to teach about love and connection. Put the phone down. Please help your children put the phones down at a certain time of the day, certainly at dinner time, so we can connect at dinner time if you can sit with them at dinner. That is so important. It floods the brain, it floods the body, it decreases inflammation, just connection alone and touch. Okay? Go ahead, dear.
Can I add to that just 1 second? You're probably not aware of this, but there's a book that has just been published and a guy traveling around the world talking about digital cocaine and how it's affecting our children.
Yeah.
And it is huge. So
Absolutely.
It's a big thing there.
No, absolutely huge. We've got a lot of cocaine. That's not cocaine. One of them is white sugar. The other one is the handheld gadgetry. I agree. And mindset. We'll talk more about mindset towards the end, but I just wanted to pop that on there because I am a mindset coach. So that people will come to me for coaching, and they might say to me, I would love to increase my business. And what we ultimately find out is that their mindset needs to be the first thing that's changed. And it might be the mindset in their home. It might be the mindset toward their business or toward their customer or toward their health and wellness. And so that is where I sort of target most of what I do. There's a voice inside your mind. Do you hear it? Most of the time. There's two voices, actually. There's your inner voice, your inner truth, which I kind of think that that's our collective consciousness. It's really connecting all of us, and a higher power. That's an inner voice. And then you have a secondary voice, which is called an ego voice. Anybody hear that one that says, what the heck, who do you think you are? Right? Yeah? Well, this relationship's not going to work. Why would you think this relationship's going to work? Well, you can eat those donuts. It's all right. That's what the ego voice sounds like. Very smooth and slick. So the goal in mindset awareness is to know the difference and know who's talking and be able to talk back to it. All right. Okay, so we are more than our DNA. Tons and tons of pages of literature and studies show that we could have genetic predispositions for things, maybe obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, but we are not only our DNA. We actually have the ability to change. We have more control than we actually think we do. All right? We can reverse things. Contrary to popular belief, we can reverse illnesses. All right? Especially the biggest one right now in this country, the epidemic of diabetes. All right. Fascinating, fascinating, and for some reason, I don't know how and where, I guess it was because my father was a doctor and I would sit for long times in his medical practice and read New England Journal of Medicine at the age of 10 or 11, that I kind of got this idea that we are the ones that can turn on and off our cells, our oncogenes, cancer, high blood pressure, our fat cells, all of those things. We can actually do that by bathing ourselves in the right things or the wrong things. Remember I told you it was about balance? If we bathe ourselves, which are so magnificent and so intricate and so designed for wellness, with the wrong things, we can turn on, just like a switch, we can turn on certain genes that cause prostate cancer, breast cancer. You can have as much estrogen as you want in your body, and some women get breast cancer and some women do not. Even though 1 in 8 is getting breast cancer, over 80% of those women who are getting breast cancer do not have a genetic predisposition. They do not have someone in their family that has had breast cancer. And what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that somewhere along the line, we have the ability to turn on and off genes, or to create the issue or not create the issue. Does that make sense? Everybody? Making sense? Okay. So there's a fundamental foundation to wellness, and there's also a fundamental foundation to illness. So I'm pushing for, when you see your doctors, turn the whole healthcare practice on its side, on its ear, by being more informed, asking better questions, knowing a little bit more about your symptoms, watching patterns. We're going to talk about this in a second, but we want to treat the system, the body system, differently versus the symptom. Okay, I mentioned diabetes, insulin resistance, vitamin D deficiency, leaky gut. So I am most definitely not covering them all. I am most definitely not getting into all the details of all of these things, but I do want to give a little bit of information on these in particular because they are very interrelated. Again, remember foundation, remember the system of the body, they're very interrelated. Diabetes, 1 in 2 Americans has this either in pre-diabetic form or diabetic form with the combination of obesity. 1 in 2 Americans, okay? Insulin resistance is a function of where there's so much sugar in the bloodstream. Does anyone know, is anyone here diabetic, I guess I should ask? Anybody diabetic, or that you know of? You're diabetic?
No, I'm
No, my family is.
Your family is?
Not me.
Okay. But you may very well want to get that checked. And the only reason I say that is, again, remember we talked about the genes? But here's the other thing that's indicative of insulin resistance, something to think about. And I had to handle this myself. So you may look at somebody and say, well, how could they be diabetic? Or how could they be insulin resistant? They could be thin, for example. They could have a little bit of extra weight around their belly. But belly fat is hugely indicative of insulin resistance. All right? Women's waist, which is about 2 inches above the hip bone. So if you were going to measure, 34 inches or greater is significant for insulin resistance. 40 inches or greater in men, significant for insulin resistance and potential prediabetes. So it's something that most of us don't know about. 90% of people who are pre-diabetic do not know it. Do not know it. It's happening, and we can help prevent it. Remember, we bathe ourselves, we talk to ourselves with the foods that we eat. We can change how the beta cells and the alpha cells of our pancreas secrete insulin and other hormones. We can talk about thyroids and thyroid hormones as well. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so on TV, now that you said insulin resistance, I remember seeing some ads for pills or whatever that are designed to address that. Is that real? I mean,
Is that real? It's always
does that stuff
real.
work? I mean,
Oh,
the
so
pills that reduce insulin resistance work. Is there such a thing that actually works?
yeah, well, it probably does work, but it has tons of other toxins, and it's actually just like metformin for when you actually become diabetic. Let's put you on the first thing is metformin, which is very toxic to the rest of the body. But the thing is, it's band-aiding an issue. Does that mean you're going to stop getting diabetic? Does that mean that you're going to stop having sugar cravings and you're going to predispose yourself to other bad things like cardiovascular risk? Yes, statins. Here's be an example. Okay, I see this is where I didn't want to go off, but I'm loving it. I appreciate the question. I would be more apt to suggest that you go to the foundation of what's causing the problem with the pancreas and the insulin and your liver, right? So, okay, let's just use this as one example. Too much sugar, refined sugar, eating refined sugar. Where does it get deposited? First of all, you have so much sugar floating around in your bloodstream, it causes an increased spike, normally, in insulin. But when you do it all the time, the insulin almost runs amok. And then there's no way that the insulin actually connects to the glucose, which gets it into the cells, which gets it into the brain, which gets it into the skeletal muscle. And I don't want to over talk, like I don't want it to be too heavy, but I just want to let you know that too much sugar in and of itself causes this cascade of events of inflammation. Then what do you do with all that sugar, all that glucose that's floating around in your bloodstream? What happens? You don't pee it out, I can promise you that. It gets lodged into your pancreas, and it gets lodged and it gets stored in your liver. So people who are relatively not grossly obese or morbidly obese are walking around with what's known as fatty liver. And by the time it gets to be that bad, fatty liver can cause cirrhosis. So not just alcohol and not just hepatitis, but fatty liver can also cause cirrhosis of the liver, which is dying of the liver cells. And before you know it, your AST and ALT, which are blood work for your liver, can go up, but you don't know why. You don't know why. Well, here it is, fatty liver. You can reverse fatty liver. So to answer your question, Alan, you can reverse insulin resistance if you work on what the mechanism is, what the underlying issue is. Thank you for that. Diabesity. So it's a vicious cycle. You have high blood sugar, we talked about, high insulin levels. You store fat. Insulin is a hormone that tells, not only does it get sugar into the cells, it tells the body to hold on to fat. Okay? And then so you develop this insulin resistance. You could read a dozen physicians' works and papers. We don't know which comes first. Is it this? Clearly this we put into our body. But what happens first? Is it this? Is it this? So one of the things I'm going to challenge you to consider, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about being prepared to see your doctor, is doctors will check glucose level, fasting glucose, right? So interestingly, fasting glucose levels that are less than 100 or around 100 typically you don't do anything with. However, if you actually knew what the insulin level is to correspond with that level of around 100 of sugar, and you actually knew what would happen in the body after you had a sugar load, which is a glucose tolerance test. Anyone who's had babies has had a glucose tolerance test. To check for gestational diabetes, where you drink this sugary drink for like 75 milligrams of sugary drink or milliliters of sugary drink, and they test your glucose and your insulin at 30 minutes, 1 hour, and 2 hours. And I promise you, none of you have had this at your doctor's. Yes or no? Except for me and you, maybe, and whoever else has had babies. We've had this happen. But this is one of the most, and I just called over to LabCorp to see how much it costs. If you wanted to pay out of pocket, it's about $100, and it just depends on, could be like anywhere from $85 to $100. So worth it if you're concerned. And what's your clue? Waist size. If your waist size is above 34 for women or above 40 for men, definitely ask your doctor to do a glucose tolerance test, an insulin resistance test as well. So it's something to think about. Well, and a lot of times people say, well, I don't necessarily want to know because I don't really know that I'm going to change anything. And if that's the case, okay, but that's not why you showed up here today. All right. All right, insulin resistance, bad carbs, making more insulin, cells become resistant, sugar stores as fat, you're feeling tired and hungry. So what are some of the symptoms, right? You're feeling fatigued, you can't gain muscle mass because you're losing, or you're storing fat in the muscle. You're storing fat in the muscle. So you can't bulk up, you can't get cut or ripped because you have too much fat in there. The other symptoms of serious vitamin D deficiency, again, I wanted to put this together because interestingly, vitamin D has an effect on insulin as well, and insulin secretion. All right? So sleep changes, mood changes, pain in bones, muscle strength is low. How about somebody who keeps getting sick? Does anyone know anybody that gets sick regularly, chronically not well? That could be a vitamin D deficiency, so I'm glad you're getting that checked. Not that you're sick all the time, but I'm just saying that's a very good place to start. That's good, Gare. Leaky gut. All right. Now, this is one of my sort of biggest sticklers most recently because I know of a very a good friend of mine who has lots of itchy skin issues, which seem on the outside as an allergen. He's not eating anything differently. He's not doing anything differently. He's not wearing anything differently. No, not using any detergents that are different. None of those things. So what it's called is chronic urticaria. Okay, idiopathic urticaria, which means, okay, well, what the heck does that mean? We have no reason to understand why he has it, let's say. Well, he's 40 pounds overweight, round here, and he was drinking Diet Coke every day, Red Bull every day, a ton of aspartame, okay? Bad, bad, bad stuff. So insulin resistant and leaky gut. What does all that extra sugar do to the gut lining? So the gut lining is supposed to be nice and tight. The intestinal mucosa cells. How about gluten? So when you have lots of breads and pastas and starches, that's another thing that could affect the intestinal lining. So this is supposed to be very tight. And as crazy as this sounds, if you don't have a tight membrane and you start to find gaps in the membrane, stuff leaks out of your gut, like poop, like bad stuff, toxins, yucky stuff. It leaks out into the body. It leaks out into the lymph tissue and the soft tissue around your belly. That is not good. What does it do? It tells the immune system, again, remember systems, functionally, the underlying mechanism, it tells the immune system to overproduce cytokines, which increase inflammation, to overproduce interleukins, to go fight the allergens, the things that are foreign, that have leaked outside the gut. We don't even know it. So what's happening is he's having skin reaction because he has too much histamine, too much cytokines, and too much inflammation, and it's manifesting on the skin. Sometimes we manifest on the skin in the form of acne. So it's not just for teenagers, but adult acne could be a sign of leaky gut because you're having a response. Go ahead, dear.
Now, is that different than psoriasis or?
No. Well, here's the thing. We don't know what the underlying cause. Psoriasis is an autoimmune process. All of what I'm describing is autoimmune. Lupus. Actually, diabetes can also be, certain forms of diabetes is an autoimmune process because you're actually attacking your beta cells. The insulin resistance is, and the fat that's in the pancreas is attacking the beta cells. Does that make sense, you guys? So again, just knowing that these systemic inflammation leading to poor health because of stress, chronic stress can do this. I'll give you another example. Who here, when you go for your cholesterol check, who here has high cholesterol? Okay, I do. It's genetic, it's Italian. I'm Italian and I have a long history of high cholesterol to the tune of 250, 280, sometimes 300. However, do you ever get the test that actually fractionates or checks the size of your particles? Anybody? No, they don't do this. Another test that is in this $90